Grace Lee Whitney played Janice Rand on Star Trek for just 8 episodes. But her firing wasn't about ratings or budget cuts in 1966. Something happened behind closed doors at Desilu Studios that changed everything. Powerful executive called her for a late-night meeting. What occurred in that empty office was covered up for 30 years. Just days later, she was mysteriously fired from the biggest show on television. The real reason would shock fans and destroy lives. This isn't the Star Trek story. You know, Grace Lee Whitney entered the world just after midnight on April 1, 1930 in a small hospital in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Her birth was registered as Marion Chase. Just 6 minutes into April Fool's Day, her biological mother signed away her rights and vanished. Without even looking at the baby, the father's name was left completely blank. There were no answers, only a silent space where a name should have been. Within weeks, the newborn was moved to Detroit as part of the state's foundling system. On June 19, 1930, a couple in their mid-40s adopted her privately and named her Grace Elaine Whitney. The woman who took her and celebrated with pink lemonade and a cake that said, "No fooling, she's ours." Grace later said that little joke made her laugh and ache. At the same time, the date of her birth always stayed with her. She would tell people, "I'm living proof that April Fool's jokes can last 85 years. But inside she believed she was a mistake. When Grace was 7, her world fell apart. It happened on a quiet Sunday, while helping her mother in the kitchen. Her mother suddenly confessed that Grace was adopted. The word real hit her hard. She felt like the floor had opened up and swallowed her whole. That night she tore the lace off her favorite dress, angry that her whole life had been built on a lie. After that, things changed. She began sleepwalking. She hoarded milk cartons from school. She stopped having birthday parties because she said, "Guests always go home." Years later, she called her Star Trek hairstyle helmet hair that hides the abandoned kid underneath. She started drinking at 17 and said each drink was her way of trying to silence that little girl who felt thrown away. By the time she was 14, Grace had a job most adults would envy. In September 1944, she won a singing contest at Detroit's biggest radio station, WJR. She wore a borrowed dress and sang a jazz standard. The program director hired her right there and paid her $14 a week, which would be about $240 today. She sang so often, 22 shows a week, that factory workers listening in the early morning hours nicknamed her Sunrise Sally. A local department store even named a lipstick after her, and it sold out by Christmas. Her days were packed. She'd finished her radio shift, run to school, and then returned for rehearsals at night. She only slept a few hours, but she didn't complain. At 15, she was paying her parents' mortgage and sending small donations to the orphanage she'd come from, trying to help the babies who hadn't yet been chosen. At 18, Grace was ready for more. She left Detroit with just $37 and a cardboard hatbox. She dropped Elaine from her name and became Lee Whitney, hoping to avoid being seen as just another pretty face. She sang at Chicago's Blue Note Club and shared the stage with Billie Holiday, who had been banned from performing in New York because of a drug conviction. Holiday earned $1,000 a week. Grace made $55. She lived in a cheap boarding house and ate hot dogs for dinner. But she studied Holiday's songs until she had the whole set list memorized in just 2 days. She also learned how to hit the right notes after a few bourbons, a skill that would later become a crutch. Her hard work paid off. Soon she was on tour with Spike Jones, playing 157 shows in 46 states in 1 year. Every stop came with a shot of rye whiskey and a new lesson in survival. Then she toured with Fred Waring and his choir, performing in 200 cities and covering 25,000 miles in 9 months. Waring was strict but charming. He drank sherry after shows and insisted on proper manners. Grace tried to follow the rules, but the constant travel and alcohol blurred everything. One night, she'd be singing in a tuxedoed choir. The next she was drinking backstage just to calm her nerves. Along the way she learned tricks for staying safe. Spike Jonze taught her to laugh before someone else did. Fred Waring shielded her from pushy men by placing his napkin gently over her hand, but there were always risks. In one city, musicians placed bets on how long it would take for the new girl singer to give in to a kiss. Grace figured out how to trade smiles for protection and stayed alert in every dressing room. In 1952, she surprised everyone by enrolling in nursing school. She delivered babies, assisted in surgeries, and wore the uniform proudly. But when Spike Jonze called about a new television show she had a choice to make, nurses made $180 a month. The show paid $250 a week plus travel. She returned to entertainment, leaving behind her starched uniform with a note that said, "Showbiz won. Bloodless but loud." She kept smelling salts and gauze in her purse for the rest of her life, just in case. Grace Lee Whitney started her journey on a high note. In 1951, she made her Broadway debut as Miss Holland in Top Banana. The show opened on November 1st at the Winter Garden Theater and ran for 350 performances before closing in October 1952. It was written as a star vehicle for Phil Silvers, who later won a Tony for his role. Whitney performed alongside legends like Rose Marie and Jack Albertson. Before this, she had been a nightclub singer, opening for Billie Holiday and Buddy Rich. Now she had earned her place in the entertainment union, a step that helped launch her Hollywood career. In 1954, when United Artists adapted Top Banana into a movie, Whitney kept her role. The film had